decided after the first video that for each one I really want to start off with a bit of like crypto cyber news to let you guys know what's going on in the world of compromise and hacks. I think that's important to kind of kick off each video, and then we'll go into talking about some things that hopefully get you guys more educated. So I found this article here, talks about Thorchain, which is a decentralized exchange, and they suffered a multi-million-dollar breach, $7.6 million in a chaos net exploit. The interesting thing is they're actually offering the person who hacked them some money to return the funds, and they'll consider it as a bug bounty. So a bug bounty usually is when developers put their code out there so folks could make an attempt to hack it, and whoever finds bugs in the code will be rewarded so that companies can close out those vulnerabilities before bad actors exploit those vulnerabilities. But obviously that happened here. So as we see here in the first part, it says the network remains halted after the protocol suffered a hack in which the perpetrator is estimated to have made off with $7.6 million in crypto assets. So the protocol, pretty much the code, was compromised in a way that the actor was able to take off with a lot of money. So initially they estimated that there was $13,000 worth of ETH stolen, which was worth about $2.5 million. And then they went back and did a reassessment and said, hey, it was actually only 4,000 ETH, which is $7.6 million. So this article doesn't necessarily disclose the nature of the hack, but they had folks that had put money into a liquidity pool, which pretty much is a kind of a crowdfunding that allows exchange of cryptocurrencies to happen more fluidly because people are making those funds available. So they had to actually go back and try to reimburse folks that put their money in that pool that lost some funds. I think, without going through this entire article here, I mean, we can see here that Thorchain's recovery plan is to release the patch, restart the network, block the pending outbounds, and restore solvency. Step 2 is donate funds back into the ETH pool to restore the lost funds to the ETH folks that added to the liquidity pool. Release the automatic solvency checker, and work with security firms to audit the event. So this is kind of a good warning to folks when you come into the crypto space and you get into some of these newer projects. That's why Bitcoin, kind of reigns supreme since it's been out in 2007. The code has been pretty solid. Hasn't been hacked. And normally when they do updates, the updates happen very slow. So what Thorchain did was they were trying to reach cross-chain compatibility with a lot of different exchanges. And here you see Thorchain entered into its guarded ChaosNet launch during April, facilitating cross-chain swaps with Bitcoin, Ethereum, Litecoin, Bitcoin Cash, and Binance Chain networks. So this was the target of the attack, was that code that enabled those cross-chain swaps. So again, when we look at Bitcoin that has been out, anytime there's an update, it takes years and a lot of consensus in order to make small updates, just because they want to make sure that they don't introduce any risk. And these newer projects, get hacked all the time because the code is not secure. So this particular project is launched on the Polkadot network. So this doesn't reflect on the security of Polkadot, but it does reflect on the code and the vulnerabilities. So here they say, as we saw here, the last step here is work with security firms to audit. That's been one of the challenges in the crypto space, is kind of coming up with a baseline of best practices. Like normally for IT services, financial institutions, government networks, and things like that, there are international organizations that create standards that folks follow to secure the networks. But inside crypto, we haven't came up with a standardized approach to security that everybody can follow and be audited against. So really, it's kind of a guessing game on making up best practices as we go for a lot of these new projects, and that's one of the things that we kind of got to get over as a hurdle, is to kind of come up with a standardized across the board. How do we check to make sure that projects are following best coding practices, best network practices, etc. Everything is decentralized, but even in the deployment of the nodes that participate in that decentralized network, they should be coded in a way where exploits can't happen, or at least have persistent monitoring, that if there was something kind of going on, especially when we have things like liquidity pools, that we can identify those bad acts as quick as possible. So I think in here they talked about, so today's attack is not the first time Thorchain has been targeted by hackers during its ChaosNet deployment, with the protocol losing at least $140,000 worth of assets last month. So again, things like this happen. Folks that, are taking their little life savings and dumping them into liquidity pools for projects that are coming out, hoping that they see return or get passive income by having their funds locked up in those things. Things can happen, and most of the time, if a company is reputable, they'll try to make things right and reimburse folks with airdrops. But definitely, be safe when you're operating out there. I prefer to lock my crypto assets up inside of crypto banks. I use Nexo Bank, I use BlockFi, I use a lot of different crypto banks where I earn funds based off of interest, pretty much off of staking my crypto with these companies. I particularly like Nexo Bank, NEXO, because they have I think a $350 million insurance policy. So while I don't own my private keys while it's stored with them, the idea that if I were to be compromised in any way while I'm using my funds to make money, that they will be able to reimburse me if they would lose my funds. So just something to think about. And here's the article from July 16. All right, so today, real quick, I just want to talk about virtual currencies, tokens and coins, and pretty much the difference between the different types of crypto investments. So there is a difference between tokens and coins, and we're going to kind of go through this. I'm trying to make sure this video doesn't go too long, so we're going to try to get through this pretty quick. If you guys have questions as we go through it, just drop them in the comment box, and if anything I say sounds wrong or you got some corrections, then go ahead and leave some comments on that too. So virtual currency is currency that's electronic, and it's transferred digitally and stored digitally. Governments are looking to create their own versions of virtual currencies, while we have things like Bitcoin, which has been determined to be start off as kind of generally a cryptocurrency, a form of payment, but it's kind of moving more into the idea of a crypto asset, kind of like property, versus a medium of exchange, although it can be used for that. Countries like China are looking to create national virtual currency. So governments are seeing the value of digital representations of money versus paper money, because it enables better exchange, faster exchange, and also helps to transition into this new age that we're going into where everything is digital. So China is creating their own central bank digital currency, which you'll hear the term CBDC, which is essentially controlled cryptocurrency. Kind of goes against the idea of where we started with Bitcoin, as far as the decentralized aspect of it, without folks having a controlling authority over the currency. It was a currency for the people, but countries like China is actually trying to force folks out of Bitcoin, and to create their own digital version of the currency. A lot of people do believe that we need an independent regulatory body that's not influenced by governments or banks to manage these things, and that's really the true nature of what we're trying to do in the cryptocurrency space. So let's talk about digital coins. So the term coin and token are often used together, but they are a bit different. A token, a coin, is essentially data that exists on a distributed network called a blockchain. So transactions are checked and verified by computers around the world. Essentially, there's a ledger of deposits and withdrawals, and when money or assets are assigned to a particular user, then that asset is stamped, signed by the person sending that transaction to the other person, and that information lives on that blockchain, saying that this individual has this amount of tokens or coins assigned to them, and it's written inside of this, append-only ledger that's decentralized in nature. So digital coins are used in the same way as fiat money. You can send and receive them. You can save. You can spend them. You can earn interest in them, and essentially, it's a store of value in some way. All right. So some cryptocurrency coins have their own independent blockchain. For example, Bitcoin is one of them. We have the Bitcoin, and we have the Bitcoin has its own ledger. Some coins, such as Bitcoin, have a limited number of coins, and therefore are influenced by supply and demand. So Bitcoin has 21 million coins that will ever exist. And I read an article today that said that in the future, only 17 million coins will ever be like in full circulation. And that was based off of the number of coins that have actually been lost or locked up, um, you know, competing with the supply that can never exist. So they said if you own 0.17 Bitcoin, I believe the article said, that you will be within the 5% of people globally once this thing kind of hits that parabolic move of adoption. So it's interesting. Coins are used for transactions on the blockchain. All right, so a number of coins are built and underpinned by Bitcoin's protocol, such as Litecoin. So Bitcoin was the primary code, and some projects did what's called a hard fork, which means that they pretty much copied the code of Bitcoin and then made some modifications, improvements, speed, whatever, to make their own project. Litecoin is one of those examples. Um, Coins are volatile. Sometimes they can be influenced by political situations, economic conditions, regulations, as we see with Bitcoin. And also, adoption is a piece that's driving volatility. Bitcoin is at a low rate of adoption right now, but as adoption happens more, not just for Bitcoin, but for other projects, then we'll see price go up or down depending on use case, acceptance, and user how many users adopt the currency. There are alternative coins that operate via their own blockchains, such as Ripple. So sometimes you hear the terminology altcoin. So anything other than Bitcoin is considered an altcoin, an alternative coin, or an alternative currency. Ethereum is an example, and that's used to send and receive and manage assets. So pretty much Ethereum manages changes of transaction state changes on the blockchain, and everybody knows Ethereum for smart contracts. So a state change in a contract may be, I'm supposed to send you 100 apples, and in exchange for that, you give me $100. So when the state changes from me having sent you 100 apples and you're receiving it, then it'll record, the release of that $100. So Ethereum manages those state changes as opposed to Bitcoin, which just looks at withdrawals and deposits inside of that ledger. Neo is another example of a project. It operates on the Neo blockchain. It has its own blockchain, and folks earn dividends for holding Neo, which is called gas. Dividends is just payments that's made as an incentive for holding that particular token. And then Dash is another example of a digital coin. So here's a quick slide on the cryptocurrency use cases. So you have store value. We talk about how there's certain assets that's being demonetized, like gold, where the value of it is being transitioned over to cryptocurrency as an asset. Some people who held gold as their primary hedge against inflation are now taking some of those funds out and moving them over to Bitcoin. So Bitcoin, could be considered a store of value, uh, and that's pretty much what it's being looked at versus a currency. Digital cash, another use for cryptocurrencies, just the ability to make payments, just using a digital form. So things like Dash is an example. Dash seeks to improve anonymity via its private send feature, and then international remittance. So XRP is the third largest cryptocurrency coin in turn. Well, it was not anymore, but it was up there as the third largest cryptocurrency. But they're trying to make those international payments happen really fast. Before we had these I think they were called Nostro accounts that sat between international payers, and things would have to be settled or negotiated from that third party, which kind of added those days of lead time in settling those transactions. And Ripple is with their network is trying to make that faster. They already work with a lot of banks and have the X Rapids network that helps to connect different financial institutions and have those payments happen a lot faster. So international remittance is one of those aspects of cryptocurrencies. Then we have things called stable coins, and a stable coin is tied to an outside asset. So things like USD Tether, USDC. There's a lot of different cryptocurrency stable coins that are tied to things like the US dollar or gold. So that way the value of the cryptocurrency doesn't fluctuate. So normally if you are inside of a volatile crypto asset and you want to decrease that volatility, you can move the funds into a stable coin, which will pretty much be tied to the value of an external or outside asset. So the idea is that, for example, $1 may be worth one tether in that example. So it says people are turning to stablecoins in Latin America as an alternative to their lower national currency. So some stablecoins are backed by commodities, just things like real estate, gold, USD. You see that little circle at the top where it has a fiat-backed stablecoins. We talked about Gemini, True USD. There's a lot of Paxos, so all these things are backed by actual hard assets. Then you have crypto-backed coins, and essentially, there may be, for example, a 2-to-1 ratio. Saying that you have to have, like, for every $500 worth of coins, or $500 worth of coins for every $2,000 worth of crypto, and that's pretty much how you create that stability. So that way, if the backing for every $500 is $2,000, then it's kind of has a padding for that volatility. So some assets are actually crypto backed, and some of them are actually backed by governed and backed by an algorithm rather than another asset. So there's different types of stable coins. The idea behind stable coins, the takeaway is really it's a coin that provides you predictability and stability and reduced volatility. A lot of words that have similar endings, but yeah, that's pretty much what a stable coin offers you. So if you hear that terminology, that's what it's about. So there are some advantages and disadvantages. We're going to kind of go through this real quick. Advantages of stablecoin is allows you to exchange funds globally. There's no borders. It's fast and it's stable. So that way, when you send one USDT, that it will represent the value of the US dollar, no matter what time of day it is. It's gonna be at least within a penny of the US dollar. The transaction speeds are fast. You don't have to wait for third-party verification, and everything is recorded on a public ledger and can be monitored. Disadvantages is that it's centrally owned, and anytime you have some centralization within the crypto space, folks tend to kind of frown on that because it's not really the nature or the spirit of what we were trying to get after initially in the crypto space. And it requires third party audits just to make sure that everything's on up and up, that it truly has that stability that is saying that it has, whether it's backed by commodities or fiat, and only as stable as the assets that they're tied to. So if the asset that is tied to starts to fluctuate for political reasons or whatever, then it's going to be issues with the stability of that particular coin. And vulnerabilities in the counterparty risk, where one needs to know whether the entity really has the collateral at stake. So if a company is saying that they have, they're backed by a particular asset, and there's no way to actually verify that they're holding that, like we see in the central banks back in the day, there was a thing called fractional banking, where banks will lend out more certificates or dollars than they had gold to back up. So when people took, for example, if they had 1 pound of gold, and they issued out 200 200 certificates that represent 200 pounds, but they really only had 100 pounds. When the people came back and they paid back the 200 loan in real assets, then the bank actually got those real assets. So whereas they only had 100 initially, now they have 200 because you actually paid back, because you had taken a loan out against, was supposed to be a certificate backed by a real asset. Obviously, in the crypto space, a little more difficult to do that type of transactions, but there could be issues with the stability of a coin if the counterparty doesn't have the assets to truly back up their currency. So there's some common archetypes of tokens. You have asset-backed tokens. You have shared-backed tokens, which is kind of similar to investing inside of a stock. Network tokens, which functions as a core component of the network, like the ERC20 tokens for Ethereum, and then exchange medium tokens, so tokens used as a medium of exchange like Bitcoin and Ethereum. So tokens have different layers or purposes. There's aspects of like how we see when we invest in crypto. Some folks may just look at it as, okay, I bought a token, it appreciated in value, I sold the token, I made money. But the tokens have more of a purpose than just increasing the value of the portfolio. There's a governance layer that's used to govern the network that they represent. It allows the holders of the tokens to make decisions on how that blockchain is managed, and it also gives you some off-chain governance power. Then there's the token layer, which kind of lets you exercise the purpose of the token. So, for example, if I were to buy a token that, for example, Bitsong is a project on the blockchain, and they're kind of like a Spotify on the blockchain. Their token allows folks to tip content creators, music creators, buy content and things of that nature. So while it can be used as an investment vehicle, you buy the tokens, you let it appreciate in value, you sell the token. Those tokens actually have purpose, so that way they can be used almost like if you had airline points and you were redeeming those airline points for a seat upgrade or drinks on the aircraft. They have a purpose. And then there's a technology layer, which is deals with the underlying platform of the token, the consensus mechanisms, validation algorithms. So, for example, whether if it's a proof of stake consensus network, which pretty much says that the folks who hold the tokens help to create the stability in the network and also help to make decisions on the network. The tokens actually serve a purpose in that respect as well. So we'll talk more about proof of stake and proof of work and different consensus mechanisms in another video. But for here, we're just going to kind of try to outline that tokens that you may purchase, don't just serve the intent of kind of growing a portfolio. They do have a lot of other layers and purposes that you may not realize. So tokens created on existing blockchains can act as a form of payment and used to foster interaction and innovation within the community. Used as incentives or awards for engaging activities. So tokens are often airdropped to the community, uh, just as incentives, or they do bug bounties, like we talked about earlier, and folks are incentivized with the native token of that particular blockchain or project to do those activities. Ethereum has a token called ERC20 token, and this is what pretty much powers the decentralized apps inside the Ethereum network. Like we talked about earlier, the tokens can be used for the decentralized applications. When we say decentralized application, just think about a website, that lives on the internet. The internet was the blockchain and the website was the DApp. Then that's pretty much how we need to look at it. So a DApp is just essentially, that website on the internet, which is the blockchain. And if you were to go pay for a service on the internet, for example, I have Audible, I get credits, and every so often I go buy a book. Those credits can be considered tokens, but I can, go buy books or whatever service is offered from that app, which is the DApp. All right. And then things like Binance, which is one of the larger exchanges, also has its own token that incentivize users when they trade. If they trade in Binance tokens, for example, if I take my US dollars, buy Binance tokens, any trade that I make on that Binance exchange, I get a discount on it. So just imagine if you were to go on Robinhood or Webull or any of those stock apps, TD Ameritrade, if they had their own native, trading currencies, and they said, hey, you can get a discount when you buy Apple stocks using our currency, then that's what kind of incentivizes folks to use that native currency for that exchange. And they're a little bit simpler to create than coins. Most developers follow templates when they make tokens, purpose-built tokens that exist out there. So, like we said, last word I used was tokens are created for different purposes. Power Ledger or WePower that represent electricity. This app allows users to buy and sell electricity on the blockchain via smart contracts. We have things like Bridge Protocol or Civic that deals with digital identities on the blockchain and allows people to put claims out there and say, hey, I'm 18, I'm from the United States, and then those claims are validated by third-party validators. And then the developers of the DApps don't have to create their own blockchain, so they normally will build on an existing blockchain, like for example Neo or Ethereum. Ethereum is a really popular one to build on. Bitcoin is not really a place where most people build apps, but with an upcoming update that's going to be happening soon, you're going to be able to do more on the Bitcoin blockchain. Stacks protocol is probably the first one that I'm aware of that has gotten a lot of attention for building on the Bitcoin network. But yeah, that's a lot of folks focus on service delivery and use tokens to power their services. So cryptocurrency token use cases, smart contracts. We talked about utilizing them for distributed applications, just pretty much like airline credits or Audible credits to pay for services, supercomputer platforms, and decentralized user identities, like we talked about with Bridge Protocol and Civic. All right, so there are some hybrid tokens. That little chart on the right, this kind of shows like a little stoplight chart of some of the challenges and good things and bad things inside the hybrid token area. And this came from sources law and blockchain.eu. So it leverages the best of utility and security offerings by combining these two. We'll talk about security offerings in a second, but we know that a utility token is a token that serves a purpose, like airline points. Normally, just like Bitcoin, they normally have some type of supply limit. They can be used to unlock utilities from the network or decentralized applications. And like all the other things that's out there, they can be used as a medium of exchange. For example, you can buy NFTs and things of that nature, and gives holders some economic value via profits or equity. So, unlike things that are specifically utility tokens, which are just used for a specific purpose, with the hybrid tokens, folks can get some type of value from holding those particular hybrid tokens. An example is Binance Coin, used to pay transaction fees on the Binance exchange, and folks get a discount on transaction fees for using the Binance token. So we mentioned security tokens. Security tokens is really a sticky situation. If you guys have heard of XRP Ripple, they're currently going through a bunch of legal battles because the SEC wants to classify them as a security, meaning that investors have an expectation of returns by holding their tokens. So we're going to talk about the Howey test in the next slide, but there's a lot of regulations that govern security tokens, and things that we consider securities are things like stocks, bonds, real estate. So if a company issues like pretty much ownership or through stocks or some type of pieces of the company through some type of representation, in this case a stock or a security token, where there's an expectation that the company will go up in value or appreciate, then that's pretty much would be classified as a security token. So those type of tokens need to be regulated, and exchanges cannot host security tokens unless they meet all the regulatory requirements to do that. So if there's a token that's labeled as a security token, which means that there's an expectation that's going to go up like a stock, then they have to follow a set of rules in order to do that. So the Howey test is a test that was developed in 1946. There's a story about a citrus farmer that leased out half his property to investors, and they considered it a security because I guess there was an expectation of some type of return in value because these citrus farms actually grew fruit. And I don't know the whole story off the top of my head. Interesting story, though I have heard it, but something you guys should check out. So there are legal conditions for the Howey test. You'll often hear if it walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, then it's a duck. And that's essentially the rule of thumb that they use when they measure projects against the idea of whether it's security. So they ask, here's the little quad chart, investment of money. If an investment of money is needed, then that's the first thing. So for example, a project launches, they say we need money. Okay, that's the first thing. That is the first part of the pie. The next part is if an expectation of profits from the investment. So I gave money, do I expect something back in return? Is there existence of a common enterprise? Is everything centrally being funneled to like a company like Amazon or something like that? And then the last piece is if it profits from the efforts of others. So are people actively going out there, promoters or third parties, trying to get folks to come back and convince them to invest into this particular item? So if those things hold to be true, then it will be considered a security. So when we look at Bitcoin, Bitcoin doesn't have a common enterprise. Bitcoin doesn't have an owner, doesn't have a CEO, doesn't have a central organization. It's truly decentralized, owned by no one, and that's what makes it, easy as far as regulatory compliance to kind of stick out. Same thing with Ethereum. Ethereum is a platform that other projects build on, and nobody expects Ethereum to go up. There's no promises for those things. So Ethereum and Bitcoin has been ruled as non-securities. They're property assets, and other projects have to be careful when they come out, because if they hold the majority of the tokens that they're issuing, then they can be easily considered a security. So this slide explains some aspects of security tokens. It talks about the different layers, how you have the blockchain layer, which is pretty much, if you think about the land that it's built on, this is Manhattan. This is the foundation that things are built on. On top of that land, you build security tokens, smart contracts that pretty much is a code that says how things should operate on that land. And then you have the issuance platform, which brings together the tools to create and issue security tokens. Issuance platform streamline the process of tokenizing assets using one of the smart contracts in layer 2. So how do we get out there and issue out the asset? And then exchanges facilitates the trades of those things. So those are the layers of a security token. Probably not something that most folks will actually interact with, but it's just good to understand. You'll hear the terminologies: layer 1, layer 2, layer 3 protocols. Just know that layer 1 is like the foundation, that's in the Manhattan, and layer 2 is what's built on top of Manhattan, which we have a lot of things that are built on top of Ethereum. A lot of projects built on top of that. So it's good to know that piece. So security tokens, not traded on regular exchanges like we talked about. You have to find exchanges that are fully comply with regulations and meet all the criteria to be accredited to trade security tokens. For security tokens, you have to do the onboarding process called Know Your Customer. They have to meet that requirement to make sure that folks aren't trying to move money illegally and that they can actually invest in those securities. And this makes sure that the everything is compliant, so to protect the investors and also meet the laws that govern those tokens. Then we have equity tokens. Equity token is pretty much a form of a security token. Just imagine if we were to get the representation of a stock in crypto form. That's essentially what an equity token is. So there's an underlying asset that gives that token value, and equity tokens also act as a derivative by tracking the value of conventional shares. There's a company I recently purchased tokens from, and they pretty much are aiming to take the stock market and represent them in the crypto space, which I thought was a great idea. Let people kind of stay inside the decentralized world while also investing in traditional companies. But that's essentially the idea of the equity token. And this slide just kind of shows a little diagram of flow of an equity token, but not really important to kind of understand the context of the idea that it's underlying value of it is some type of asset, like a share of a company, to back it up. Utility tokens is a lot of the safe space that we operate in the crypto space. Utility token, if it's not a security, it's a utility token, and these are the tokens that we use to trade goods and services, buy goods and services on the blockchain. So it's not an investment vehicle to generate profit. The token symbolizes the right and obligation between the issuers and the holders. So during the boom in 2017, there was a lot of companies coming out as utility tokens. Some of them got investigated and found out that they weren't necessarily utility tokens, so they kind of fell off the map. But just know that utility token is a token that's used for a specific purpose, a service, and is not considered an investment. So when you get inside of a project and you start to go and beat down the project owners inside those Telegram groups, asking them, when is their project going to start turning investments, just know that when you bought those tokens, the understanding was that you believed in the project, planned to use the services, planned to enable governance on the network, planned to do something that we talked about in those other aspects of what tokens do outside of just gaining money. That was the expectation when you purchased that token. There's no promise in return of value. The only thing you should be tracking when you purchase a utility token is the project developing? Are they creating the services that they said they were going to create? Are people using those services? But it's not necessarily about return on profit. It's about creating a service that can be purchased or you participating in the governance model by holding those tokens. So imply that utility does not share traits with equity or is perceived as a form of investment. We talked about that. We talked about how they're a medium of exchange. As we can see here, the underlying value is the network. The purposes is service access. And from a legal perspective, we have to look at it as a utility token, which when you start asking those questions, if they use any type of terms like your investment or anything like that, the SEC will jump all over those type of statements, and those people will be held accountable if there's a perception that they're making people believe that there's a return of value. So again, they're used within decentralized applications. They're not financial, they're not like an equity, and they're usually oriented to some type of actual utility. So again, there are some advantages and disadvantages. The advantages is lies in the ability to bootstrap network adoptions. Users have access to products and services. For example, like getting their digital identities or purchasing music. Holders can vote on a network's well-being, and there's no third parties involved. Disadvantages is this: it's not regulated. I know a lot of folks are saying, well, regulation is not a good thing, because it sounds like somebody's putting rules on it. But regulation actually creates predictability and a framework in which folks can operate, where that things are being done right. In the past, folks have promised goals and have not delivered on those goals for those utility tokens, saying, hey, I'm going to create an airline where you're going to be able to get free seat upgrades, but the airline never comes out. Or they create a token and there's not really any real utility behind the token. So when you see a utility token and they say that you're going to be able to use it for a particular function, probably good to see who's backing up those projects and if they have the team or the partnerships to really deliver those services or utilities that they're promising. There's no mechanism to increase the value of the token. Doesn't promote the adoption of cryptocurrencies. No empowerment of the community, and liquidity problems associated with maybe not reaching capital necessary for adoption. So yeah, the utility tokens are great. The thing is that there's over 9,000 projects in the crypto space. A lot of them are overlapping and aiming to solve the same problem sets. So it's really a game of who's going to have the best utility with their token and which one's going to reach that critical mass where it's going to be something that is going to stick. And not only are you going to see, even though it's not a security, there's no promise for returns, but honestly, everybody wants to see returns when they put their money behind a project. I doubt that anybody wants to utilize every single service of every single project that they invest in, but we go into the investment in the crypto space with the mindset of gaining returns without understanding that these projects, for one, are not promising you a return, and two, they can't say anything that will make you believe that there's a return or even answer some of your questions, because that would implicate them to meet certain regulatory requirements, and sometimes that might mean taking their entire project down until they meet those requirements. So a lot of folks are very careful of staying squarely in the scope of utility versus security. So yeah, that was a bit of a rundown. Hopefully you guys learned something about the differences between the different types of coins and investment vehicles in the crypto space. Please post your questions in the comments, and looking forward to having more content with you guys.